And today we're taking a journey into the idea of boundaries, not literal fences or walls, but the less tangible ones, moral, intellectual, social, that shape our lives in ways you might not even notice until, well, someone points them out. And that's exactly what SC Sales does in the paper, or actually the book, Limitations, the moral necessity of boundaries. So what's the central issue here? Basically, Sales is asking, what happens when our culture, especially in the modern West, stops trusting limits of any kind? The kind of boundaries that say, this is okay, this is not, or even, this means something, this doesn't. According to Sales, we've kind of entered what he calls the age of the shrug. It's this cultural mood where we avoid drawing lines because, we don't want to seem dogmatic or harsh. We shrug, he says, not out of ignorance, but as a way to avoid commitment and responsibility. But is shrugging harmless? Here's where it gets interesting. Sales actually claims that refusing to set boundaries hasn't really made us freer or more compassionate. Instead, it's made our culture kind of unstable and, in some ways, more anxious. He doesn't condemn modern virtues like tolerance, freedom, inclusion, or empathy. In fact, he's pretty careful to say these are good things, but his core question is, what happens when we stretch these virtues so far they lose all shape? Let me break down his method a bit because, honestly, this is pretty key to understanding what he's doing. Sales introduces something he calls jurisdictionalism. Basically, before we judge what something means, he wants us to ask who even has the authority to judge, who gets to decide where the lines actually go, and how do we avoid simply assuming that our instincts about boundaries are correct. This shows up, for example, when he talks about explanation, the way science, psychology, or even sociology explains how things happen. He says, sure, explanations are great, but they can't actually tell us what something means or what we ought to do about it. Explanation, he writes, can witness, but it shouldn't be the judge. So if you're tuning in and thinking, why should I care about all this boundary talk? Here's where it really touches on everyday life. Sales goes through 9 ideals: explanation, neutrality, relativism, tolerance, freedom, inclusion, equality, empathy, and harm. He claims that in each case, taking a good thing and making it absolute, like always being neutral, or never saying anyone's wrong, or always believing harm has occurred, ends up making those ideals brittle, fragile, and sometimes even unintentionally unfair. There's this especially memorable point about neutrality. People often think staying neutral is safe, it's humble, maybe even like the high road. Sales flips that on its head. Neutrality, he claims, is never neutral. When people in positions of power, teachers, managers, whatever, refuse to judge, their so-called neutrality just preserves things as they are. The powerful stay powerful, and the vulnerable stay, well, vulnerable. The non-choice, as he calls it, ends up being a choice with real consequences. And he argues too that virtues like tolerance and freedom can, if left unbounded, backfire. Tolerance, for example, can end up protecting behavior that actually harms others. Inclusion, when it's about including everything, with no limits, can make a group so unfocused that true belonging, actual meaningful connection, becomes impossible. He's saying, look, boundaries are not about being mean or exclusive. They're the very conditions that make it possible to live together with clarity and compassion. Are there risks with empathy? Well, Sales warns that making empathy, or just feeling for others, the central authority in moral life, leads to decisions based entirely on emotion. Empathy is partial. It can't always help us navigate competing claims or keep justice steady when big emotions flare up. And about harm. If every disagreement becomes harm, debate collapses and law and reason are replaced by sentiment. His conclusion isn't a checklist or quick fix. It's a call to recover responsibility. We don't need to go back to dogma, he says. we need to see and accept the boundaries that allow real moral agency, real community to exist. So what does this mean for you where you live, work, make choices? Maybe the takeaway is just that boundaries aren't the enemy. They're like, well, the grammar of being human together. Their absence doesn't liberate. It kind of leaves things unmoored, strange, hard to manage. The big idea is to hold on to virtues, yes, but not to turn them into absolutes that break under their own weight.